The hum of the orbital hospital was deafening in its own way, a constant vibration that rattled every panel, every doorway, and every nervous thought. For most visitors, it was a marvel of human engineering. Massive, transparent walls revealing the black of space, automated drones gliding silently with supplies, and AI-assisted monitors tracking patients in every room. But for Dr. Elias Merrick, it was chaos disguised as sophistication. He had spent years in war zones, treating injuries that made civilians gasp, and yet this place was worse than any frontline hospital he had ever endured. Equipment broke mid-use, doctors argued over petty protocols, and nurses moved, as if pulled in 10 different directions at once. Today, however, the hospital faced a challenge unlike any other. A vessel from the outer systems had arrived, announcing a passenger whose very presence could reshape humanity's understanding of the galaxy, Princess Lyra of the Aquarians. She was blue-skinned, regal, and dying. That alone would have made her important, but she was more than that. She was the heir to a civilization that had thrived for millennia, one whose technology and knowledge dwarfed humanity's in almost every measurable way. And the worst hospital on Earth had been assigned to treat her. Elias had been summoned reluctantly to the reception bay. The message had been blunt: handle the patient, fail, and face the consequences. He knew what that meant. Fail to save Lyra, and the repercussions could range from demotion to public humiliation. Succeed. Well, there were no real rewards in a hospital where success was only expected, never celebrated. Still, he approached the incoming transport with cautious focus, his mind running through every possible scenario. The transport bay door hissed open. Inside floated a figure, held in a suspension pod, her form thin and fragile, despite the elaborate regalia she wore. Blue skin glimmered faintly under the harsh lighting, delicate veins visible beneath the surface, tracing the flow of life like electric currents in a fragile circuit. Her eyes were closed, lashes dark against the soft blue, and her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. The hospital staff recoiled slightly at the sight, a mixture of fear and awe. Some whispered among themselves, questioning whether this human facility could even keep her alive. Elias stepped forward, ignoring the murmurs. His instincts were sharper than anyone's here. He knew life when it teetered on the edge, and this girl, this royal figure, was hanging by a thread. "Unseal the pod," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. A nurse, trembling, swiped her hand across a biometric scanner. The pod hissed open, and Lyra's body slumped forward slightly, barely supported by the anti-gravity harness. Her chest rose and fell in shallow movements, each breath a fragile effort. Elias examined her immediately. Alien physiology was always a gamble. Their organs might function similarly to humans, but the differences could be lethal if treated incorrectly. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low, her circulatory system unstable. The monitors designed for human vitals were flashing warnings at every turn, and the hospital's equipment was glitching, sensors misreading, alarms chiming randomly. "Who's responsible for the vitals monitoring?" Elias barked. A junior doctor stepped forward, looking embarrassed.
"I am, sir. The system."
"Get her stabilized now!" Elias snapped. He had no time for excuses. He scanned her body quickly, noting the signs of acute hypoxia and the early onset of organ failure. Every second counted. He realized, with a mixture of dread and determination, that he couldn't rely on the hospital's equipment. If he wanted her alive, he would have to improvise. He instructed the nurses to prepare a makeshift oxygen environment, using whatever specialized tanks they had for alien patients. Some were outdated, some malfunctioned, but it was the best option available. He adjusted her breathing mask personally, checking the fit against the contours of her alien features. Her skin seemed almost luminescent now, flickering faintly under the stress of oxygen deprivation. She's not going to last long," one of the junior doctors whispered. Elias ignored him, focused on the task at hand. "Listen to me," he said quietly, leaning close so only Lyra could hear. "You're going to make it. You don't get to leave this place yet." Not on my watch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, her fingers twitched. A shiver ran along her body. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing deep, luminous eyes that seemed to look straight through him. Elias caught a glint of recognition, or maybe trust. It was fleeting, but it was enough. He knew he had only one chance. The standard procedures would fail. The hospital's protocols were outdated, too rigid, and too dependent on machines that couldn't read her biology correctly. He decided to trust what humans had done best for millennia: observation, improvisation, and courage. Using a combination of human medicine and his knowledge of alien anatomy, gathered from briefings and incomplete files, he began a risky procedure. It involved manually regulating her heart rate and oxygen flow while administering a serum he synthesized from available compounds, designed to stabilize her fragile circulatory system. Every adjustment was critical. Too much, and it could kill her instantly. Too little, and she would die just the same. Time became elastic. Minutes stretched into hours as he worked with intense focus. The alarms around him created a chaotic symphony. Drones buzzed past carrying supplies, and nurses hovered anxiously, unsure whether to intervene or step back. Elias relied only on his instincts and knowledge. He whispered instructions to Lyra as he worked, explaining every movement, as if the sound of his voice could anchor her to life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the monitors stabilized. Her breathing evened out, her heart rate steadied, and the faint luminescence in her skin returned to a calmer, more natural glow. Elias allowed himself a small exhale, knowing the fight was far from over, but a critical battle had been won. Lyra opened her eyes fully now, staring at him with a mix of confusion and gratitude. Her voice was soft, musical, and broken in English. "You saved me." "Why?" Elias shrugged lightly, trying to hide the exhaustion etched into his features. "Because it's what humans do. We don't give up, not on life." For the first time, Lyra smiled faintly, though it was weak, almost imperceptible. That small gesture carried a weight he could not measure. It was more than gratitude. It was acknowledgement that humans, messy and flawed as they were, could rise to challenges that no protocol, no machine, no regulation could handle. The hospital, meanwhile, continued its chaotic rhythm. Alarms continued to beep. Staff continued to argue over minor mistakes, and the head administrators looked on with a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. Elias didn't care. Right now, in this small, fragile victory, humanity had won. Lyra's survival was more than just a medical achievement. It was proof that even in a place as broken as this hospital, human ingenuity, courage, and determination could defy the odds. And for the first time, Elias understood why her arrival had been called a huge favor. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. But right here, right now, in the smallest acts of care and courage, humans were proving themselves capable of greatness. Lyra's eyes followed him as he stepped back, and for a moment, the chaotic hospital faded around them. There was only life, fragile and precious, and the bond between two beings from different worlds who had survived against impossible odds. "Rest now," Elias instructed gently. "You'll need strength for what comes next." Lyra nodded, leaning back into the makeshift supports, and for the first time, allowed herself to feel safe. In that brief moment, the hum of the orbital hospital no longer seemed menacing. It was just a background noise, a reminder that life persisted, even here, even under imperfect human care. Elias looked around at the staff, whose anxiety had not diminished, but whose respect for him had grown silently. They had witnessed something extraordinary. The worst hospital on Earth had just survived a test no one had expected it could pass, and in the middle of it all stood a human doctor, determined, unyielding, and unshaken by the odds. For Lyra, the fight for survival was far from over. For Elias, it was only the beginning. And for the galaxy, The arrival of a blue-skinned princess at Earth's worst hospital would mark the first step in a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Events that would prove once and for all that humanity was not to be underestimated. And as Lyra drifted into a shallow, exhausted sleep, her hand twitching slightly in a gesture of tentative trust, Elias stood silently by her side. He did not know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would fight for her life, using every scrap of human skill and courage he had. Because sometimes survival was not about technology, or politics, or rules. It was about people, human people, with their stubborn hearts, their quick thinking, and their relentless determination. And in that moment, the hospital's failures did not matter. Humanity's heart had been revealed, beating steady, strong, and unyielding in the face of a challenge that would have broken almost anyone else. Elias allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. He had saved a princess, yes, but more importantly, he had reminded himself, and the universe, that humans were capable of miracles, even in the worst of circumstances. The orbital hospital's corridors buzzed with activity, but none of it seemed real to Elias. He had spent the last few hours beside Princess Lyra, monitoring her fragile body, ensuring her recovery. Every now and then, her faint breathing reminded him of how close they had come to losing her. And yet, despite her exhaustion, her eyes now held a quiet determination that unsettled him.
Dr. Merrick! A voice called from the doorway.
It was Nurse Kiera, her expression a mixture of worry and frustration. The council's liaison is here. They want to see her immediately. The Aquarian Council? Here? He had anticipated political attention eventually, but not this soon. Lyra's survival was fragile. She could not be exposed to long meetings or excessive stress.
They insist, Kira replied.
They're insistent. He sighed. Politics and bureaucracy were never kind to the ill, and in this case, Lyra was both. Fine, but I'll go with her. No one sees her alone. The liaison arrived, a tall, angular being with a presence that made the humans in the room instinctively step back. Lyra's head shifted slightly, tracking the alien figure with cautious curiosity. Elias placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, an unspoken promise that she was safe. "Princess Lyra," the liaison began in melodic tones, "your condition is concerning. We require assurances that you will be treated according to Aquarian standards." Elias bristled.
I assure you I will do everything I can to keep her alive, but your standards, they're irrelevant here.
This hospital operates differently. The alien's gaze flicked to him sharply. Differently is not necessarily acceptable.
We expect compliance, Doctor. Elias met the stare evenly.
I expect her to survive. That's my standard. Lyra stirred slightly, her voice weak but clear. He helps. Trust him. The words were simple, broken, but carried more weight than any diplomatic phrase. It was rare for Aquarians to hear a subordinate speak so freely, yet the sincerity in Lyra's voice made it difficult to argue. Finally, the alien inclined their heads slightly and stepped back, though vigilance remained in their posture. Once the meeting ended, Elias helped Lyra settle back into her supports. Her hands, delicate and blue, twitched as if testing her strength.
They will come for me, she said softly. They will take me back to the palace. And the council, they do not forgive weakness.
Elias studied her. Weakness was relative. She had survived a hospital that could have killed her in minutes. Still, her life depended on more than just medical skill. It depended on strategy, trust, and timing.
Then we prepare, he said. We make sure they do not succeed.
Not until you are strong enough to handle them yourself. She gave a faint nod. Humans, strange. You fight even when you are not needed. But I see your strength. The words hung in the air, a reminder of the gulf between species. Humans were unpredictable, messy, and often reckless, but they also possessed a stubborn courage that many alien civilizations lacked. It was that stubbornness that had saved her life, and it would be the same quality that determined whether she survived the days ahead. Over the next few hours, Elias began preparing for her temporary relocation to a more secure part of the hospital. He could not trust the general wards, not with her condition so unstable. The hospital's staff, though well-meaning, were too slow, too chaotic, and too prone to errors. He worked with what he could, improvising stabilizers from available supplies, recalibrating malfunctioning monitoring devices, and teaching the nurses how to observe alien physiology in ways the machines could not. Lyra watched him work, fascinated by the human precision hidden beneath apparent chaos. You improvise," she said quietly. "It is different from Aquarian methods, but it works." Elias allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the best method is the one that works, even if it's messy. Her faint laugh was musical, though strained by weakness. Messy, perhaps that is humanity. As night fell across the orbital station, news arrived of political unrest in the outer systems. A faction within the Aquarian Council opposed Lyra's extended stay on Earth, citing security concerns. Some even suggested that her exposure to humans was dangerous, potentially compromising royal bloodlines. The situation grew tense. If she were forced back before her body was fully recovered, she could die. The stakes were no longer medical. They were political and lethal. Elias understood the gravity. The hospital was their only advantage. It was chaotic, yes, but it was also unpredictable in ways outsiders could not control. If the Council sent agents, they would not anticipate the human capacity to adapt, to improvise, to fight with nothing but courage and quick thinking, and Elias was determined to use that edge. "Dr. Merrick," Kiera said, coming into his makeshift command center. "Security has requested your presence. There's talk of a possible extraction attempt tonight." Extraction attempts were rare on Earth, especially from human facilities. But desperate political factions could do anything. He quickly formulated a plan. It would be risky. It would require exploiting the hospital's failures, power outages, malfunctioning lifts, sensor blind spots, and turning them into traps. And it would require him to trust humans and Lyra, to act with courage under pressure. "Gather the staff," he said.
We're going to make this hospital a fortress. And not the kind you think.
We're going to fight with what we have, not what we should have. Lyra's gaze sharpened.
"Fight? Already? I thought. Recovery first." Elias shook his head. "Recovery can wait until the danger passes. Right now, survival is immediate." The plan was simple but daring. They would use the hospital's broken elevators as barriers, force the extraction team through malfunctioning doors that would expose them to security measures, and improvise defense systems from whatever equipment was at hand. Every human involved needed to act as if the chaos itself was an ally, because it was. As night deepened, the first signs of intrusion appeared. Sensor alarms flared briefly, then went silent due to a glitch. Elias had anticipated this. He moved Lyra to a hidden corridor, one often ignored due to faulty readings, and waited. Moments later, shadows moved through the hallways. Aliens, sleek, precise, and deadly. Advanced, confident that human disorganization would make the task easy. But they had miscalculated. The hospital's failures, which had almost killed Lyra earlier, were now their undoing. Doors failed to open, lifts descended unexpectedly, and maintenance drones, reprogrammed by Elias in minutes, created unexpected obstacles. Elias guided Lyra silently, using hand signals and whispered commands. Her body was weak, but her mind was sharp. She used her alien knowledge to anticipate the intruder's moves, subtly signaling when to move, when to pause, when to hide. Humans and alien royalty, working together in a fragile but perfect harmony. A sudden loud crash echoed through the corridor. One of the intruders had triggered a malfunctioning support rail, sending a trolley careening into their path. They recovered quickly, but the delay was enough. Elias led Lyra through a maintenance hatch he had prepared, emerging into a service area no one thought to guard. For a moment, both caught their breath. Elias's heart raced, but he felt a rare satisfaction. Humans, flawed and unpredictable, had turned their disadvantage into a strength, and Lyra, for all her alien grace and knowledge, had trusted him completely. "You are clever," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Humans." "Your methods? Unpredictable. Effective."
Elias allowed himself a brief smile. Unpredictability is humanity's greatest weapon.
Never forget it. They continued to navigate the hospital, each step fraught with risk. The intruders were clever, but they had expected an easy target. Humans were messy, slow, and chaotic. But that messiness, that chaos, allowed for creativity, for improvisation, for courage. And Elias had plenty of courage to spare. Hours later, they reached the secure wing, where temporary stabilizers and enhanced monitoring awaited. Lyra collapsed onto the supports, exhausted but safe. Elias sat beside her, finally allowing himself to relax.
"You've saved me again," Lyra said softly, her eyes half-lidded. "Earth."
"Your people, not as weak as I believed." Elias shook his head. "We're not perfect. Far from it. But when it matters most, humans rise. That's what matters." Outside, the orbital station continued its rhythm, unaware that it had become a battlefield for survival and trust. But inside, in the chaos and the uncertainty, a human doctor and a dying princess had formed a bond, one that would endure, shaping not only their fates, but potentially the future of both Earth and the Aquarian Empire. Elias glanced at Lyra, her faint blue glow now steady, and allowed himself a thought he rarely permitted. Hope. Hope that humans, flawed, messy, and often underestimated, could protect life, inspire trust, and rise to challenges that no one, not even the most advanced alien civilization, could predict. As dawn approached in the station, light glinting off the edges of Earth far below, he knew this was only the beginning. The political storms were coming, the Council's scrutiny would intensify, and the galaxy would begin to watch. But for now, Lyra was alive. And in that moment, survival was everything. For Elias, for Lyra, and for humanity, the fight had only just begun. And they would meet it with courage, wit, and that unpredictable spark that made humans human. The orbital hospital had quieted for a short moment, but Elias knew it was the calm before the storm. Lyra's body had stabilized, but the real danger had only begun. Word of her survival and the hospital's unusual methods had traveled quickly through both human and alien channels. Political factions, spies, and rogue agents were now aware that she was vulnerable, and they would not wait. Elias moved through the corridors, checking the makeshift defenses he had set up the previous night. Every door that had been unreliable now served a purpose. Every broken lift, every glitching monitor, every maintenance drone had become part of a network designed to delay, confuse, and trap any intruder. Lyra followed him, moving cautiously, still weak, but increasingly alert. They will come again," she said, her voice low but steady.
They do not forgive delays.
Elias nodded. "Then we make sure they regret it."
He did not smile. This was serious. But inside, he felt the familiar rush of challenge that humans had faced countless times. Battlefields, natural disasters, and now an alien infiltration. Improvisation, courage, and quick thinking would be their greatest weapons.
Hours later, as the orbital station's artificial night cycle ended, sensors picked up movement. Aliens, sleek, precise, and deadly, were entering the hospital through maintenance access points.
They expected an easy target, a weakened princess in an already disorganized facility. They had underestimated human unpredictability. Elias quickly gathered the staff he trusted most. "Listen," he said, his voice calm but commanding.
They think we are weak. They think the hospital is chaos.
"Good. We use it. Every glitch, every broken system, every mistake they assume as weakness. Turn it into advantage. Follow my lead." Lyra watched him, her sharp blue eyes reflecting both fatigue and curiosity. "Humans, strange," she said.
Your chaos? It becomes strength? Elias allowed a brief smirk. Exactly.
"And now we see if it works." The first wave of intruders reached the main corridor. Elias and his team had anticipated their path, guiding Lyra through hidden maintenance passages. Drones, repurposed for defense, hovered silently, ready to interfere with the invaders' sensors. When the intruders triggered a faulty door mechanism, it swung open unexpectedly, knocking one of them off balance. That brief distraction gave Elias and Lyra a small head start. They moved quickly, her steps unsteady but determined, his mind calculating each risk. "This way," he whispered, leading her into a service elevator that had been rigged to stall in case of intruder activity. The elevator shuddered and groaned, holding its position longer than expected. The intruders reached it moments later, but the malfunction delayed them. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they knew how to turn luck into strategy. Lyra, though weak, began contributing. Using knowledge of alien physiology and technology, she identified points where the intruders' systems could be disrupted. "Sensors? Blind spots here," she said, pointing to areas the intruders would not anticipate. Elias listened carefully, impressed by her rapid thinking despite her condition. Together, human intuition and alien knowledge formed an unusual but effective partnership. The hospital's corridors became a maze of traps and improvisations. Faulty lights created shadows that concealed their movements. Malfunctioning maintenance bots blocked certain hallways, forcing intruders into narrow passages. Elias used every tool at his disposal, from repurposed medical equipment to emergency lighting, turning ordinary devices into defensive obstacles. Despite the tension, he noticed something else: Lyra's resolve. She was exhausted, but her mind remained sharp. "Humans, your unpredictability," she whispered. "It is dangerous, but I trust it." Elias nodded, though he remained focused. Trust was a fragile thing, especially in the face of danger. But trust between human and alien, he realized, could be more powerful than any weapon. The intruders were not without skill. They adapted quickly, attempting to bypass the obstacles with calculated efficiency. But human creativity proved difficult to predict. When one of them tried to disable a repurposed drone, Elias anticipated the move, remotely activating the drone's emergency protocols. It emitted a bright flash, blinding the intruder temporarily and giving Lyra a chance to move. "You're clever," she said, panting slightly. "Not like anyone I have seen." Elias shook his head, focusing on the next challenge. Humans survive by thinking differently, by acting when others hesitate. That's what gives us strength. Hours passed as they navigated the hospital's maze, moving from corridor to corridor, evading detection while slowly forcing the intruders into positions where they could be contained. The hospital, once a symbol of inefficiency, had become a defensive fortress, powered by improvisation and human courage. Finally, they reached a central service chamber, a room few knew existed. Elias quickly set up a temporary stabilization field for Lyra and positioned sensors and drones around the exits. The intruders, now realizing they were being outmaneuvered, attempted a direct assault. The battle that followed was tense and strategic. Elias directed the drones to create barriers, guide intruders into blind spots, and exploit the hospital's quirks. Lyra, despite her weakness, used her knowledge to enhance the defenses, guiding him on where to block, where to delay, and where to strike. Every movement relied on trust, calculation, and rapid improvisation. Elias could feel his adrenaline surging, but his mind remained calm. This was humanity at its best, facing a challenge with courage, intelligence, and relentless determination. Mistakes could be fatal, but hesitation was far worse. Hours later, the intruders were forced to retreat. They had underestimated the combined force of human unpredictability and alien insight. The hospital, though battered and chaotic, had held. Lyra's life remained secure. She collapsed onto a support bench, exhausted but alive. Elias knelt beside her, checking her vitals.
"You did well," he said quietly. "Better than you realize."
Humans, you fight, even when the odds impossible.
It's not about belief. It's not about belief. It's about action. And sometimes, action is the only thing that matters. The station's quiet returned, but it was a quiet filled with new respect. Staff moved with renewed purpose, inspired by what they had witnessed. Humans turning chaos into strength, courage into strategy, and life itself into a defiance against impossible odds. Lyra, finally resting, let herself feel the significance. She had survived an assault that no Aquarian would have thought possible. Not because of superior technology, but because of human ingenuity, trust, and moral courage. Elias stood silently, watching her sleep. The galaxy could doubt humans all it wanted, but those who faced them directly would soon learn a simple truth. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of rising above any challenge. As dawn approached, light filtering through the station's windows, Elias allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The night had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but it had proven something fundamental. Humans, for all their flaws, could protect life, inspire trust, and act decisively when others faltered. Lyra's hand twitched faintly in sleep, a small signal of life, trust, and understanding. Elias knew that the battle was far from over. Political pressure, alien factions, and even internal threats could strike again at any moment. But for now, survival had been claimed, and human ingenuity had been shown in full force. He sat beside her quietly, allowing himself a thought he rarely admitted: hope. Hope that humans, messy and unpredictable as they were, could meet the challenges of the galaxy and protect what mattered most. And perhaps, in doing so, change not only their own fate, but that of an entire civilization. The hospital had been chaotic, the intruders clever, and the odds impossible. Yet through courage, creativity, and unwavering determination, humans had prevailed, and Elias Merrick, weary but unbroken, understood the truth more clearly than ever. Humanity's strength was not in perfection, but in the ability to rise, adapt, and endure against all odds. Lyra stirred slightly, blinking against the light. "You are strange," she whispered softly, her voice weak but sincere. "You are human, and you saved me."
Elias allowed himself a brief, tired smile. "That's what humans do," he said quietly.
We fight. We adapt, we survive, and sometimes we save others along the way. For the first time, Lyra seemed to understand, not just the words, but the essence of it. In humans, she saw something unique, something that no advanced technology, no royal decree, and no alien protocol could replicate. It was courage, unpredictability, and an unyielding will to survive. And in that understanding, the bond between human and alien was strengthened, forged in the fires of chaos, danger, and survival. They were no longer just doctor and patient. They were allies, partners, and proof that sometimes the smallest, most chaotic beings could stand against impossible odds and prevail. The night ended not in victory or defeat, but in quiet understanding. The hospital remained imperfect, broken, and chaotic. But within that chaos, humans had shown their worth. And as the first light of day washed across the station, Elias and Lyra knew one thing with certainty. The galaxy would soon learn that underestimating humanity was the greatest mistake it could ever make. The first light of the orbital station glinted off the edges of Earth far below, reflecting a world oblivious to the storm that had raged above it. Elias Merrick stood at the central corridor, surveying the hospital he had transformed from chaos into a fortress. The intruders had retreated for now, but intelligence reports warned that this was only the beginning. A more organized strike could come at any moment. He glanced at Princess Lyra, who was regaining strength, her blue skin now steady in color, her eyes sharp and alert. "We need to prepare for them," Elias said. "If they try again, we will be ready." Lyra nodded, her voice calm but determined. "I understand we must."
Use your human ways. Unpredictable.
Strong, clever. Elias allowed himself a brief smile. Humans thrived on unpredictability, but it required coordination, courage, and quick thinking. He'd already seen how humans could adapt when forced into impossible situations. But this would be the ultimate test. The hospital's staff had rallied behind him. What was once a group of anxious, inefficient humans was now a team functioning with precision under his guidance. Drones hovered strategically, doors were rigged with fail-safes, and every hallway had contingency plans. Even the hospital's power failures had been turned into advantages, creating shadows and blind spots that only humans could navigate effectively. Lyra moved beside him, scanning monitors and recalibrating emergency systems with careful precision.
You're humans. They fight with heart.
Not only skill. That is remarkable. Elias nodded. It's not just skill. It's courage, the willingness to act when others freeze, the ability to improvise. That's what keeps people alive. That's what keeps hope alive. The first sign of attack came mid-morning. Sensors detected multiple alien vessels approaching from the station's docking bays, sleek and armed, carrying elite units, intent on retrieving Lyra. This time, the intruders would not be sloppy. They had learned from the previous attempt. But Elias had also learned. He would not wait for them to make the first move. He assembled his team. Positions, everyone knows their task. Drones, block entrances. Security, set traps.
Maintenance, be ready for improvisation. And we protect her.
No compromises. Lyra, though exhausted, joined in actively. She identified structural weak points in the hospital, suggesting ways to use the alien attackers' expectations against them. Together, human unpredictability and alien knowledge created a plan that even the intruders could not anticipate. The attack began with a sudden breach in one of the service hatches. A squad of aliens entered, moving silently but with deadly precision. Elias and his team were ready. He activated the first line of improvised defenses. Drones swooped down, emitting blinding flashes and creating temporary barriers. Hallways became a labyrinth of obstacles, lights flickering, doors jamming, and maintenance bots moving unpredictably. The aliens advanced, but every predictable path had been blocked. They split into smaller teams, trying to outflank the defenders. But Elias had anticipated this. Each corridor was a trap, every unexpected object a potential barrier. Humans thrived in chaos, and now the chaos itself was an ally. Lyra's knowledge proved invaluable. She directed Elias to points where the intruders' armor and sensors could be disrupted.
Yeah!
There is weak point in their system, she whispered urgently. Elias followed her guidance, repurposing hospital equipment to create electromagnetic pulses that disabled the intruders' advanced tech momentarily. The battle was tense. Aliens were formidable, trained for precision and strategy. But humans fought with improvisation, courage, and creativity. One of the intruders attempted to bypass a locked door using advanced hacking, but a misaligned sensor, deliberately left in place by Elias, detected him. A drone swooped down, colliding with the intruder and buying valuable seconds. Elias guided Lyra through the chaos, protecting her and coordinating his team simultaneously. Her body was still fragile, but her mind remained sharp, calculating and directing defensive moves. Together, they were a force neither fully human nor fully alien, a hybrid of courage, ingenuity, and experience. Hours passed, the battle ebbing and flowing like a tide. The intruders adapted quickly, but the human team adapted faster. Every failed attempt by the enemy revealed an unexpected advantage. Every misstep by the hospital became an opportunity. Humans, with all their flaws, turned weaknesses into weapons. Finally, the intruders attempted a direct assault on Lyra's temporary recovery chamber.
Elias anticipated this, moving ahead to block the hallway and triggering a preset trap. A malfunctioning lift fell partially into the corridor, creating a barrier.
Emergency lights flashed erratically, creating shadows that hid their movements. Drones swooped down again, forcing the intruders to split and exposing them to defensive maneuvers. Lyra, despite exhaustion, contributed by identifying points in the structure where her alien physiology allowed her to manipulate environmental systems that humans could not. She rerouted energy from auxiliary systems to create a temporary force field, blocking a direct path. Humans adapted, improvising on the spot to support her actions. Elias moved swiftly, coordinating both human and alien abilities. "Now!" he shouted. The team pushed forward, forcing the intruders into a hallway rigged with compressed gas canisters. When triggered, the canisters released a sudden burst, knocking the intruders off balance without causing lethal harm. Humans had turned the hospital itself into a strategic weapon, and it worked flawlessly. One by one, the intruders retreated, unable to adapt to the unpredictable combination of human ingenuity and Lyra's alien insight. The battle was over. The hospital, battered and chaotic, had survived intact, and Lyra, though exhausted, had remained alive and unharmed. Silence fell. Elias checked her vitals carefully. "You're safe," he said. For now, Lyra exhaled, her body relaxing for the first time in hours.
"Humans, your chaos, it is."
Perhaps stronger than any order. Elias shook his head, still vigilant. It's not chaos. It's courage, creativity, the willingness to act when nothing else seems possible. That's human strength. The hospital staff moved cautiously, checking for any remaining threats. They had witnessed something extraordinary. Human determination, courage, and improvisation had overcome a technologically superior force. Their confidence had grown, their respect for Elias and the methods he had taught undeniable. Lyra sat up slightly, her blue eyes bright and focused. "I understand now. Humans underestimated."
But they fight. They adapt.
They survive. Elias nodded. "And sometimes we save others along the way. That's what makes humans remarkable." Outside, the orbital station continued its routine, oblivious to the events that had just unfolded. But inside, a bond had been forged between two beings from entirely different worlds. Human ingenuity had saved a life that was not human. Courage had triumphed over superior technology. And in that victory, humanity had proven its worth. Lyra stood, testing her strength. She looked at Elias with something that resembled admiration, though tempered with the seriousness of duty.
"I owe you my life, but perhaps not only life."
You showed me what humans can do.
I, will remember.
Elias allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Remember this. Human strength isn't measured by perfection or power.
It's measured by the courage to act, to adapt, and to protect what matters most. That's all any of us can do. The days that followed were quieter but filled with preparation. Lyra's health improved steadily under Elias's careful watch. The political factions that had sought to remove her were now hesitant, wary of the unexpected resistance they had encountered. Humans had proven themselves unpredictable, resourceful, and not to be underestimated. Lyra spent hours observing the humans in the hospital, learning from them, asking questions about their decisions, their improvisations, and their courage. She saw patterns, yes, but also the creativity that defied patterns, the essence of human strength. Finally, when she was well enough to travel, she stood at the observation deck, looking down at Earth below. Elias joined her, standing quietly, knowing that this moment was significant. "Humans, you are strange," she said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Your world, your people, unpredictable, strong, brave. I will carry this knowledge back home. And they will carry the knowledge of you too, not just your technology or your royal status. They'll remember what you taught us, that even in the hardest moments, courage, ingenuity, and trust can change the outcome. Then, perhaps, Earth is not just a planet. It is a place of potential, strength of humans, undeniable." Elias placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "It is, and sometimes it takes the right challenge to see it. You gave us one, and we rose to it." The orbital station's alarms went silent, the hum of machinery a gentle backdrop to the realization that humanity had triumphed, not through technology, wealth, or politics, but through courage, creativity, and unwavering will. "I leave soon, but I will remember Earth." "Humans, you. Courage, unyielding." Elias watched as she prepared to depart, knowing that her return to the Aquarian Empire would carry a message of human worth, bravery, and ingenuity. She had witnessed firsthand that humanity, for all its flaws, could rise above challenges that others deemed impossible. As her ship departed, light glinting against the station's hull, Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. The hospital, the staff, and humanity itself had proven something profound, that even in chaos, even in imperfection, humans could shine brighter than anyone imagined. And in that moment he understood something essential. The galaxy would learn, sooner or later, that underestimating humanity was a mistake it could not afford to make. Humans were messy, unpredictable, flawed, and yet unstoppable when their courage and ingenuity were tested. The orbital hospital returned to its usual rhythm, still imperfect, still chaotic, but forever changed by the events of the past days. Within its walls, a story had been written, not in reports, not in protocols, but in action, courage, and resilience. And humanity had won, in the simplest, most profound way, by surviving, protecting life, and rising to the challenge when it mattered most. Elias stood in the quiet control room, watching the stars, thinking about the future. There would be more challenges, more intruders, and more political storms. But humans had shown their worth, and as long as they acted with courage, creativity, and determination, there was no obstacle they could not face. Lyra's departure was not an end. It was a beginning for humanity to prove itself, not through conquest or power, but through the qualities that defined it: bravery, ingenuity, and an unyielding will to survive and protect what mattered most. Elias allowed himself a small smile, a rare moment of quiet triumph. He had saved a life, yes, but he had also shown what humanity could do when it mattered most, and that, he knew, was the greatest victory of all.